the floor. I thought it would be fun to do this video on the floor. So you decided to get some lights, some proper dedicated film lights, and you spent the past couple of hours, days, weeks even, researching into the correct lights for you. Or you could be like me, who was very generously given the SL1 60DN by Ifootage to use and test out on this video, so big thanks to them. So you finally get your lights, you set up your camera, you set up your light stand, and you fire away. Oh, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like a movie, a proper movie. This doesn't look like my Magic in the Water. This doesn't look like my Sailor or 120 Days of Sodom. This doesn't look like my Inflatable Sex Dolls of the Wasteland, which is a real movie, by the way. Look it up. But what separates my lighting from the pros? I'll tell you. It's a little thing called light modification.
And just for clarification, I'm only going to be focusing on stuff you can do to one light. So I'm not going to be talking on cutting like Planix. I'm not going to be talking about haze. And I'm not going to be talking really about any sort of advanced setups like code lighting or such.
So our first method is simply slapping a softbox on that sucker. Like, we could get quite scientific, put our physicist caps on and talk about like the inverse square law of light. But if you hadn't noticed, I'm on the floor talking about movie lighting. I'm not that guy. But I can give you incredibly broad rules of thumb, like the larger the light source, the softer the light, which is the basic principle of a softbox. It's just adding something to the front of your light to make the source bigger. Just slapping something on it and making it a big old softy. Now there's hard lighting and there's soft lighting, and whilst both certainly have their place and uses, conventional wisdom is that the softer the light, the much more flattering and cinematic, especially when it's concerning the old visage. So simply put, a softbox. Just put a softbox on it. You'll probably want to buy something with a Bowens mount, which is by far the most common type of lighting attachment bracket. But really, there's a whole litany of things you could also use. You could use a 5-in-1 reflector, they're pretty cheap. You could use a shower curtain. You could use any white fabric, just so long as it's reflective and vaguely translucent. It should also be noted that there is another way to achieve this effect without needing to increase the size of the source. That being to simply put the source and subject close together. The further away, the harder the light, whilst the closer, the softer. It's why the sun, despite its size, being hundreds of thousands of miles wide, produces hard light, whilst on an overcast day the light is softer as the sky effectively acts as a softbox. But I hear you cry, I can't move my light closer to my subject, and for reasons only known to you, you can't use a softbox either. What can I do? Well, let me introduce you to the concept of bouncing the light, which is exactly as it sounds. It's pointing the light at something bright and reflective and firing away. Again, we're working off the same principle as the softbox, which is making the light source larger. So if I was to bounce the light off this white ceiling, which is a much larger area than the actual softbox, the light would be softer. To achieve this, you can use professional and dedicated bounce boards and reflectors, but virtually anything that's bright or reflective will work. A wall, a mirror, even the white fabric of this t-shirt will do it. And of course, it's incredibly common practice for most professional cinematographers to use a combination of both bounce and diffusion, the booklight being a particularly popular setup.
A word of warning, however.
Every time you bounce or diffuse your light, it will lose a degree of brightness. Now you should be fine, especially if you don't overdo it, but if your light's maximum brightness isn't very bright, you may want to take this into account. So far, we've only focused on methods that soften the light, but in doing so, light is now spilling all around the room, creating hotspots and reflections, or maybe even removing shadows that we wanted. But what can we do if we want to better control the light? Grid. The grid or egg crate simply attaches to the front of our light, but in doing so reduces the light spill and focuses the light onto a smaller area. So let's say hypothetically you wanted to light your subject, but to keep the background darker in order to create separation and depth. By placing a grid on your light, we can focus our light firmly on the subject. Alternatively, we can also use reflector dishes or black wrap to achieve a similar, if not more pronounced, result. So, we've covered so far how to control the quality and shape of our light. But what about colour? Now this, depending on what lights you have access to, may not be all that relevant. If you have access to bicoloured or RGB lights, you can easily dial in what colours you desire at will. But if it's the case that your light is either day or tungsten balanced, there still are several cheap options for you, in the form of lighting gels. An infinite variety of gels, with the two big chiefs of the lighting kingdom being CTO and CTB, otherwise known as color temperature orange and color temperature blue. So, let's say I wanted to make my light source warmer. I can slap some CTO on, and now I'm sweltering. Both CTO and CTB come with different strengths, so you can try experiment with them, play about with them, layer them up to get the look that you're really looking for. Of course, if you're like me and you're filming on RAW, you can change color temperature after the fact. And in addition to CTO and CTB, there are party gels, which exist in a wide variety of distinct colors. There's blue, green, and more. You can even combine them to get all kinds of crazy colors. I'm sure you'll think of something. I know you will. I believe in you. Diffusion, bounce, shape and colour. All tools the pros use to make their lighting look more filmic and cinematic. And it equally applies to YouTube videos as it does feature films. So that's it till next time. Unlike the last two videos, which were kind of unplanned flukes, I already know what I'm working on next, and you may have even spotted it being used in this very video. So, big thanks to Ifootage for the light, and I will